What if the way he looks at you isn't about you at all? What if his desire has less to do with who you are and more to do with who he unconsciously needs you to be? Many women carry the weight of being misunderstood in love, not because they are unclear, but because they are seen through a lens that was shaped long before they arrived. And perhaps you felt it too, the unsettling feeling of being wanted intensely, but not quite seen. This pain isn't born from rejection. It's born from a distortion. You become a mirror, not for the truth, but for a fantasy, a memory, or a wound. In psychological terms, we call this projection. A man, often unknowingly, projects parts of his unconscious onto a woman he finds compelling. His past, a distant mother, a nurturing sister, a controlling ex, merges with the present moment, and you become the symbolic resolution for his internal conflict. He sees you, yes, but only as a reflection of what he's still trying to reconcile. And here's the trap. Because it feels familiar to him, it may feel flattering to you. You sense the depth of his attention, his fascination, the way he seems drawn to you without explanation. But familiarity is not always intimacy. Sometimes it's just repetition disguised as connection. Sigmund Freud, in his work on transference, noted how people unconsciously reenact emotional dynamics from childhood in their adult relationships. Love, in this frame, becomes less of a choice and more of a compulsion. We pursue not what we want, but what feels unresolved. We repeat patterns, hoping this time the outcome will be different. So how do you know if he truly sees you, or simply the version of someone he once needed to love him? Observe the details he highlights. Is he enchanted by your strength or threatened by it? Does he respond to your silence with curiosity, or does he fill it with assumptions? When you assert your needs, does he meet them, or does he retreat into confusion or critique? A man who sees you clearly won't just want your presence. He will respect your complexity. He will not fear your wholeness. He won't try to define you with labels from his past. Let me share the story of a woman. We'll call her Eleanor. Independent, thoughtful, emotionally generous. She met a man who seemed captivated by her from the start. He said she was unlike anyone he'd ever known. He admired her wisdom, her calm, her strength, but soon his admiration turned into expectation. When she expressed a boundary, he became distant. When she spoke less, he assumed she was disappointed in him. Eleanor realized he wasn't falling in love with her, but with a symbol she unknowingly activated in him. The mother who once withheld praise, the teacher who was always composed, the fantasy of a woman who would never leave. Freud would say, the woman became a screen, a surface onto which the man projected unresolved needs, and then punished her for not fulfilling them. It wasn't love, it was emotional repetition. So I ask you now, are you being cherished for who you are, or for the story someone else has written about you? Emotional freedom begins when we step out of the mirror and back into the body. It begins when we ask not, why doesn't he understand me? But rather, what part of me agreed to play this role? The practice is simple but powerful. Write this in your journal. I am not a symbol. I am a woman with needs, limits, and truth. Say it. Feel it. Let it ground you the next time someone stares too long and listens too little. Because the woman you are becoming no longer reflects what he lacks. She embodies what she no longer gives away. Archetypes in attraction, the roles we unknowingly play. What role have you been cast in without your consent? What silent script do you find yourself acting out in relationships again and again, even when you swear this time will be different? Attraction is rarely neutral. It often emerges not from clarity, but from a profound inner hunger, a desire to see something in the other that awakens a part of ourselves long buried, denied, or idealized. And within this exchange, unconscious roles come alive. We don't just fall in love, we fall into character. Carl Jung called these inner patterns archetypes, universal symbols that live within our collective psyche. For women, these include the mother, the lover, the healer, the wild woman. For men, the warrior, the king, the child, and most centrally the anima and animus, the feminine within the man and the masculine within the woman. When a man is disconnected from his inner feminine, his vulnerability, his intuition, his emotional depth, he may seek it outside himself, and often he finds it in you, not because he wants to understand you, but because he wants you to carry it for him. You become the anima, his emotional guide, his spiritual balm, his symbol of softness. But the weight of that projection is immense, because if you falter or fall out of his ideal, the fantasy shatters, and so does the bond. Many women also fall prey to a more corrosive dynamic, the savior complex. You feel drawn to men who are broken, wounded, unsure. You sense their pain, and without realizing it, you step in to soothe, to fix, to redeem. You don't fall in love with who he is, you fall in love with who he could be, and in doing so, you neglect who you are. But healing is not a gift you can give to someone else, and love is not a hospital. When care becomes currency, when your nurturing becomes the only reason he stays, you are no longer a partner, you're a role. And roles don't get seen, they get used. To break this mold, you must first see it. Ask yourself, when do I feel most loved? When I'm being me, or when I'm being needed? Freud might say this. The roles we perform are reinforced by the rewards they once brought us. Perhaps in childhood your affection was praised only when you were helpful. Perhaps silence made you feel safe. These learned behaviors become survival mechanisms, and then identities. But they are not destiny. The woman who steps out of the archetype steps into her essence. She no longer performs emotional labor as proof of her worth. She no longer confuses intensity with intimacy. She no longer tries to rescue a man from drowning by handing him her lungs. Instead, she becomes a witness, not a savior. She listens but doesn't absorb. She feels but doesn't fix. She walks alongside, not beneath. So here is your invitation. Write this down. I am not the role you project. I am the truth you must learn to face. Let that sentence be your mirror. The next time you feel yourself slipping into a role, the caretaker, the pleaser, the rescuer, pause, breathe, ask, what would it feel like to just be me here now, without earning love? The power of presence, beyond words and actions. Have you ever walked into a room and felt a shift? Not because of what you said, but because of who you were in that silence. Have you noticed how some people seem to draw attention without trying, while others speak endlessly and still remain unseen? In the realm of attraction, presence is more potent than performance. Before words ever reach his ears, your emotional frequency has already spoken. It's not what you say, it's what you are that resonates. Every woman carries an emotional vibration. It's the unspoken tone of how she feels about herself, and it colors every glance, every gesture, every silence. If you enter a connection seeking validation, that need, though unspoken, can be felt. If you've made peace with solitude, that groundedness creates a magnetic force of its own. Emotional energy is not a metaphor. It's a form of communication. Psychologists call this non-verbal signaling. It includes body language, tone of voice, posture, eye contact. But beyond the surface, it includes your internal landscape, your self-concept, your emotional clarity, your unconscious beliefs. When you feel too much or not enough, that discomfort echoes in every interaction, not because you say it, but because you carry it. And often the men who are drawn to you are responding not to your words, but to your frequency. A man who is emotionally avoidant may be drawn to your silence, not because he values your mystery, but because it gives him permission to stay emotionally distant. A man who fears abandonment may be magnetized by your warmth, but soon resent it when he feels engulfed. Your presence becomes a mirror for his emotional landscape. Freud might remind us that these dynamics aren't always conscious. Attraction, in its earliest form, often bypasses logic. It's a reenactment of past experiences, unmet needs, and familiar patterns. So how do we shift from being reactive energy to authentic presence? It begins with alignment. When your words, emotions, and actions are rooted in the same truth, you create coherence, a kind of emotional integrity. People may not always understand it, but they will feel it. And presence, unlike charm or performance, doesn't seek to please. It seeks to be. It says, "This is who I am, whole, unpolished, evolving." There's nothing louder than that kind of quiet confidence. Let me tell you about a woman, Sophia. She didn't speak often, but when she did, every word felt grounded. Men were drawn to her, not because she flirted or played games, but because she was clear. She knew when she was available and when she wasn't. She knew what her silence meant and what her gaze offered. There was no confusion, because she wasn't trying to create attraction. She was creating truth. You don't need to over-explain, overshare, or overperform to be valued. You only need to align your energy with your essence. If you're tired, be tired. If you're clear, be clear. If you're not sure, say so. The body knows when we're faking it, and it tenses, contracts, whispers, "This is not who I am." So, here's your practice. Write this down. My presence is enough. My silence holds truth. I do not perform to be loved. Next time you find yourself reaching to prove your worth, pause, breathe into your belly, ground your feet, and ask yourself, is this really me, or a version I think they'll prefer? The dance of desire, navigating unconscious attractions. Why does he pull away just when you start to feel close? Why do you find yourself more drawn to him when he becomes emotionally distant? There's a cruel irony in how desire often thrives in spaces of uncertainty. The push-pull dynamic, that maddening rhythm of closeness followed by withdrawal, can make even the most grounded woman question her sanity. But what if the confusion isn't a flaw in your connection, but a signal from your nervous system shaped by years of emotional conditioning? Attraction, especially the intense kind that leaves you breathless, is rarely rational. It often originates in old emotional blueprints, the unhealed childhood patterns, the familiar heartbreaks, the roles we've learned to play. When he distances himself, you chase, not because you lack dignity, but because your emotional memory mistakes distance for danger. You're not just wanting him, you're trying to resolve a past wound through him. This is the heart of intermittent reinforcement, a term from behavior psychology. It refers to the most powerful and addictive form of conditioning. When affection and attention are given inconsistently, the brain clings harder, hoping to recreate the last high. This is the same pattern seen in gambling addiction, and yes, in certain types of romance. It's not the person you crave, it's the emotional reward that keeps slipping through your fingers. Freud might say, in the absence of emotional certainty, the unconscious clings to mystery as a substitute for meaning. And mystery, though intoxicating, can easily become manipulation, especially when one partner uses withdrawal to control the intensity of the connection. But not all mystery is toxic. In the early stages of attraction, not knowing everything about the other creates curiosity. That's natural. The danger arises when that ambiguity becomes a game. When your needs are labeled too much, your clarity is met with silence, and your vulnerability is used against you. The question then is not, why is he doing this, but why am I still staying? Because once again, the mirror turns inward. If the dance of desire keeps leaving you breathless but unfulfilled, you must ask yourself, what am I chasing? Love or emotional validation? Let me introduce you to a woman named Daria. Every time she started to feel close to someone, he would back away. But instead of retreating, she intensified her efforts. She made herself more available, more agreeable, more impressive, until one day she paused and asked, why do I keep proving myself to someone who's only present when I'm struggling? That question broke the spell. Not the connection, but the compulsion. Daria realized she wasn't in love. She was in a loop. To step out of that loop, you must anchor yourself in your own emotional gravity. Ground yourself not in how much you feel for him, but in how much you're willing to feel abandoned again. Because the woman you are becoming doesn't beg to be chosen. She chooses herself, even when desire tempts her to forget. Your practice. Write this phrase and let it echo in your body. Desire is not always truth. Sometimes it's memory dressed in longing. So the next time you feel the magnetic pull of someone inconsistent, ask, am I drawn to him or to the unfinished story he represents? Embracing self-awareness, the key to empowered relationships. What if the most profound relationship you'll ever have is the one you build with yourself, not out of solitude, but from truth? For many women, the turning point doesn't come with a grand betrayal or a heartbreak. It comes quietly, in a moment of emotional exhaustion, when you finally ask, why do I keep choosing what hurts me? That question isn't weakness, it's awakening, because beneath every repeated pattern lies a hidden belief. I must earn love. I am too much. If I set boundaries, I'll be abandoned. These aren't just thoughts. They are internal laws written long ago by experiences you didn't choose. But here's the freedom. What was once unconscious can be brought into the light, and what is seen can be changed. Self-awareness isn't about blame. It's about clarity. It's the process of distinguishing who you truly are from the persona you've performed. The you who laughs to ease tension. The you who says yes when her body screams no. The you who shrinks, apologizes, endures. That's not you, that's adaptation. Freud often emphasized that much of our emotional life is shaped by early experiences, not remembered, but felt. We repeat what we don't repair, but when you pause to observe your patterns, you begin the process of reparenting. You stop asking the world to fix what your childhood fractured, and you begin to nurture the woman you've become. One of the most radical tools of emotional empowerment is this: setting boundaries, not as walls, but as invitations, to be in relationship without losing yourself. A boundary is not punishment, it is clarity. It says, this is where I end and where you begin. This is what I accept. This is what I release. A woman with boundaries teaches others how to treat her without saying a word. Her silence is not passive, it's directional. Her no is not cruelty, it's self-respect. And her detachment is not absence, it's alignment. Let's return to a woman named Lucia. After decades of caretaking, she found herself in yet another relationship where her needs were minimized. One day she said no, not with rage, but with calm certainty. The response? Confusion, resistance, then silence. But in that silence, Lucia heard something new, her own voice. It was steady. It was enough. That's what growth looks like. Not fireworks, but groundedness. Not perfection, but presence. You stop explaining. You start observing. You no longer chase love. You notice who offers it freely, and who only stays when you forget yourself. So what can you do now? Begin with a simple practice. Write this down. I release the roles. I reclaim my reality. I deserve to be seen, not symbolized. Every time you feel pulled into an old pattern, pause. Ask, who am I in this moment, and who do I want to be? Because empowered relationships don't begin with finding the right partner. They begin with becoming the woman who no longer abandons herself. The woman who walks alone is not always lonely. Sometimes she's complete. And now I ask you, gently but clearly, what do you unknowingly symbolize in the eyes of others? And when will you begin to reclaim the right to be seen for who you truly are? This journey is not about judgment, it's about awareness. The moment you begin to see yourself, not through the projections of others, but through your own clear gaze, you begin to step out of repetition and into freedom. If this reflection stirred something in you, don't keep it inside. Subscribe to this channel to continue walking this path of deep emotional clarity, and leave a comment below. What role are you finally ready to release? Because the woman you are becoming doesn't just love differently, she lives awake. Silence is also a response, and sometimes your greatest healing.